Hi there, I'm Mark,
Hi, I'm Marty.
and welcome to segment two of Stay in Your Lane.
Yeah, we're glad that you're joining us today. Remember to give us a thumbs up, like us, and subscribe to our channel because it's going to be very powerful for you or a loved one that is trying to remain sober.
Yeah, and if you haven't done so already, take a peek at our first video. That gives a little bit of our background. And I think for today's episode, we'd like to dive into a little bit more of what helped us stay on our sober journey. What tools did we use to get to where we're at today? And Marty, if you'd like to start, that would be great.
Yeah, I'd like to also stress that we are doing our recordings from home. We are in different cities, but also for COVID, and this has been a real challenging time for people with addictions. Especially, I went to a behavioral psychiatrist who helped me get over my addiction, who had been to many different attempts before, uh, group therapy, independent therapists, trying to cold turkey it, do it on my own. But the tool that I found that worked best for me this time was a behavioral therapist who worked with me to notice that um, the alcohol was just a reaction to different actions that took place through my behaviors. So he helped me identify a part of the things that were my triggers that would be where I felt as though I was losing control in a situation. So what I would do is, like, I had a tendency to be OCD, where all my clothes in my closet had to be hanging the same direction. My shoes had to be going in a certain direction. Things couldn't be set at certain places in the house. And what would happen is when I couldn't control everything, I then would resort to drinking. So one of the things in my toolbox was having to give up what I thought was control, when is actually the ultimate thing was I would give into alcohol or drugs, and that would make me lose control, even though I shrouded in something that looked like control. So big things for me is that I realized that I needed to be able to follow my passions. I had to connect with what I was passionate about in life, right? And so I gardening, reading, exercise. But the big thing is capturing my lifelong dream of sitting down and writing a book. And so it was that every day getting up and knowing that I was going to reward myself with writing. And the thing that's wonderful about it is the old me would have thought that I had to be the best writer, best author. And if I wasn't, don't do it, right? Because that was my attitude. Because I just thought that that was the only way to go about it. But just sitting down and writing is the magical part, and that is the reward for me. That's one of my that well, Mark, that's my major tool in my toolbox,
Right.
because I'm so connected to it. So yeah, I mean, I think just being passionate about what you're doing, right? In finding what your purpose is in life. Those are my big things. Those are my strongest tool in the toolbox.
hmm for me, I tried independently to stop drinking a few times. I ended up in rehab. I took the tools that they gave me, but I wasn't consciously ready to give alcohol up altogether. So trying to do that a few times on my own ended up fueling my drinking a bit more. And I ended up with a DUI, and then 6 months later, a second DUI in a car accident. And what I decided then was that I needed to embrace the tools being presented to me and follow through with everything, all the information they were giving me. And so I ended up in an outpatient rehab program for 8 weeks. And that armed my tool belt with many more tools to, deal with triggers, to deal with the emotions, to deal with traumas in the past that I was basically drinking to cover up. So, unfortunately, after my car accident, a month later, I lost my younger brother in an alcohol related car accident as well. So, in AA, they like to call, this hitting your lowest low or hitting rock bottom, your spiritual awakening. I had my spiritual awakening or my, rock bottom when I had my car accident. But when my brother had his and I lost him, that was that really sealed the deal for me that I needed to get serious about this. So I think getting serious for me was having the tool belt with the sober tools and actually using them, because I had the sober tool belt for, a couple years with the tools, but I just was opting not to use them. So that journey for me was super helpful. Um, I don't know. I feel from a tool perspective, the tools that I was armed with then allowed me to start incorporating daily disciplines into my life that gave me strength. One that I was sharing with Marty earlier, I like to make my own soda water now, and that is an experience for me. Typically after work, I would come home and make a cocktail, but now the act of making my own soda water and picking different flavors if I so choose, that is a little experience for me that helped replace the habitual act of wanting to have a cocktail after work. I love my little Nespresso machine in the mornings where I make an espresso or a latte. And again, I've created an experience in my morning that brings me joy. And Marty talks about his book being his passion. I think we have to tap into little passions as well and little things that bring us joy. The coffee brings me joy, the soda water, reading, little ways to fill my day when it typically would have been filled with drinking.
Yeah, you brought up a lot of good points there. And one of the things that really stands out again is that you can have all these tools in the toolbox, but if you don't make the conscious effort to get skilled at using them, that they're just tools in the toolbox, right? And like you said, it's applying that skill set to, you had those for a couple of years,
Right.
um, until you had really, you're like, wow, I've got the tools, let me work with them and let me make something better out of this for myself. That really resonated out of your story for me, and it's so true. um, because there's so many times, and I think that you have to be at that point. I mean, to realize that, look, I'm going to do this. I'm in, because, and there's no shame in keeping trying and trying and trying to get sober. I mean, God knows how many times I tried, right? And
Oh, yeah.
but until you get that epiphany where you're gonna do it, you know, just, you're going to sit down and you're going to do it then. And I
Yeah.
think you just get to that point.
Yeah. I think you brought up a really good word too that I think we should talk about right now. There's a lot of shame attached with addiction. And one thing that I would like to impress upon everyone right now is, as hard as it is sometimes, you have to let that go. We, every every relapse, every time you have a drink and you get back on the horse and say today is day one, it's not a failure. It's an opportunity to grow. It's an opportunity to learn more about what tools are going to be successful for you. I think the important thing about this segment for Marty and myself was the fact there is not one way that is going to work for everyone. You might need to use a therapist. You might need to use AA. I used AA in the beginning of my journey, and I found that there are other tools that I find more advantageous to where I'm at in my life right now. But don't be afraid to meet yourself exactly where you are and gravitate towards the tools that are going to work for you. And they might change.
Right. They will change it, right?
Right.
Right. A couple things there is that shameless conversation. When I was talking to a friend of mine, his brother suffers from addictive behaviors right now. And one of the things is he owns a business, and one of his employees there has been sober, I think he said 14 years. And the guy constantly talks about his, addiction days to everybody that he can, right? And it is so powerful that once you cross that threshold and you are put it right out there, hey, this is part of who I was, or this is part of who I am, it's like that shame melts away and it becomes a superpower, right?
Yes.
In in conversing about it has so much strength. And I think that any of these things that we've talked about, AA, individual therapist, psychiatrist, what do you go there and you talk about your addictive behaviors? And so it's the same thing when you go out. Don't be ashamed of it. Wear it as a badge of honor. Talk about it, and it's amazing. When I went to the lawyer, for that case that we were talking, believe it or not, high profile lawyer. I told him about some of my arrests that I had. About, he says, "Were you addicted to drugs or alcohol during that time?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "That's exactly it." He says, "So was I," right? And he told me his story, and I mean, it's just like you never know who you're talking to and what they've been through until you put it out there, right? And
Right.
so, sorry, I'm just passionate about that. I think that the open conversation is wonderful.
Oh, yeah, and I think what you've just done is you hit the nail on the head. The direct way to get rid of shame is to be vulnerable about what you've gone through, about what you've struggled with. And I attribute a lot of my success in this sober journey for me is when I finally decided that I needed to do this, I started telling everyone about my struggles. I was in the hair industry for 18 years, and every client that sat down in my chair, I told them about my accident. I told them about my DUIs. And every time I share that story, a little bit of weight is lifted off of my shoulders. And that is such a powerful thing. Vulnerability will cancel out shame. And
Yes.
remember that. And if you want to reinforce that tool, watch Brene Brown's TED Talk on vulnerability and shame, and it will blow your mind. I absolutely love the work that she's doing in the shame arena and all the people that she's touching with her words and with her tools on vulnerability and shame.
Yeah, it's a huge network. Once you start being more vulnerable and once you start conversing on it, you're going to see that you're not alone in this at all, right? That there's a huge network of people with success stories of sobriety, and I mean that want to share their story, but you have to be willing to share yours in order to get to that golden egg, and be able to. But I do also want to point out, Mark, is that we're talking about these other how to get into the sobriety point, but you have a program that you've developed, and hopefully you don't mind me throwing you out there, but you're developing a program for the continued sobriety and what to do with your sobriety, and I think that's something that the so far that the sober living has not come to grip with, is that even it shouldn't be as much of a support group, but hey, what do I do with my sobriety?
Right.
Do you mind talking about that a little bit?
No, not at all. I think that there is a natural gap between rehab and life. A lot of times you go through an 8-week, 12-week, however long the program is, and then you get thrown back into daily life. So you have to arm yourself with some tools. What do you want that transformation to look like? And I have developed transformation and sobriety program that deals with just that. We have to reinforce healthy boundaries. We have to work on our mindset. We have to deal with past traumas. We have to be vulnerable. So it's taking all that newfound time and energy that we're not drinking or drugging and putting a proactive plan on what to do with that. So basically bridging the gap between where you're at today in your sobriety and where do you want to be in your sobriety, and putting a good action plan together. And I would love to dive into more of that on another episode, because I feel like some of my modules definitely have great information that would be a great conversation in the show.
Yeah, I think that once again, it's another avenue, another resource for people, and we can always use additional information. It's just another a chapter in your own personal book.
Oh yeah, and thanks for bringing it up. I certainly don't want this to be a sales pitch for my business, but in relation to what we're talking about right now, my business has given me the opportunity as a transformation coach to be vulnerable about my experience and to use my life experience to help other people. And what that does directly for me is it strengthens my sobriety. So I'm following a passion, I'm following my purpose, and at the end of the day, it's helping me stay on the path that I'm choosing to be on.
It's the payout.
It's the payout.
It's the
Correct.
personal payout.
Yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
something greater than monetary.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll dive into passion, purpose, and payout in another segment as well. But I think this has given some great nuggets of information for great conversation.
Yeah, I agree. I think that once again, in our upcoming episodes, we're going to cover a lot more topics, things that I mean, are just fun and
Yeah,
supportive, and just I mean, but that's what this is all about. Just let's have a good time with living life sober.
absolutely. So, like us, subscribe to us. Please shoot us an email on YouTube. Let us know what topics you'd like to hear about. And we look forward to seeing you on our next segment.
All right.
Bye bye.
Bye, everyone.